I pulled up a little stat here that if you've got other crop of, let's say, just 0.5% of orchard grass, you could end up planting 12 to 16 orchard grass seeds per square foot. So while it may seem like, 0.5%, a half a percent doesn't seem like much, it can certainly add up very quickly. The one that sometimes we see mixed in with Kentucky bluegrass is what we call rough bluegrass, which is a very cool season loving, burns out during the heat of summer. But even a half a percent of this, what we call rough bluegrass, you can have 25 to 35 seeds per square foot. So here again, if your expectation is this beautiful lush lawn, you really want that other crop down to like 0.01%, almost 100%. It's hard a lot of times when they're cleaning grass seed to get everything out, but that's what we're striving for. We're striving to get the best quality possible.
The first half of September is prime lawn time for Kansas's cool season grasses, primarily tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. Cool season lawns may also benefit from an application of fertilizer. On today's Sound Living, Fall Lawn Care. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wickman. K-State Research and Extension horticulture agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton, says that choosing quality seed is the first step in successfully planting or overseeding cool season lawns. Dennis, fall planting time close at hand, and of course when we talk about grass seed, we talk about buying quality grass seed, and one of the things that we're trying to avoid is getting too much of what's called other seed.
Right. In Kansas, growing grass is not the easiest task. We can grow a lot of different species. We can grow what they call warm season grasses like Bermuda, zoysia. We can grow cool season grasses, the tall fescue bluegrass, but they all struggle at some point in time. And of course, here we come into September. This is the ideal time to overseed, reseed a cool season lawn, the bluegrass fescue lawns. But it starts with buying quality seed. And you mentioned the other crop word. And the other crop word, in another way to put it, is almost like buying junk or potentially weed seeds. Other crops or other plants on the bag that have to be listed by their species. They can be such things as orchardgrass and other things too, rough bluegrass. They can pretty much destroy a really nice uniform stand of grass.
You're going to end up with a lot of patchiness sort of from that?
Yeah, so a lot of these in what I'd call inferior grasses don't have the texture, the color, the form that we really think. So you end up with this really clumpy appearance, especially with orchard grass, which is one of the main contaminants a lot of times in tall fescue seed. It's very stemmy, very wiry, very coarse. For those wanting that even more that lush look lawn, it can be a problem. So here again, when we look at the grass seed label, and maybe that's where we should circle back to is, yes, there is a label on grass seed, just like there's a label on the food you buy or a label on fertilizers, and that label on a grass seed bag tells us exactly what's in there. That's required by law, and that's what we really want to look at. That's probably your starting point to make sure you're getting good quality seed.
So you want to find out exactly what the mixture is, and then when we talk about that other crop seed, we want to be as low as possible.
Right. 0 would be ideal, but sometimes that is difficult. So yeah, like I said, if you're planting lawn grasses in Kansas this time of year, the two that are most successful are going to be bluegrass and tall fescue. And for the vast majority of the state, tall fescue is going to be the turf grass of choice. It is our more heat and drought tolerant of the two cool season grasses. Bluegrass has some advantages because it has runners and rhizomes, but it's maybe not quite as heat and drought tolerant. So when you go to buy that bag of grass to do some seeding here in the coming weeks, you really want that mix to be pretty much 100% bluegrass, 100% tall fescue. Now, you can have 2 or 3 varieties of bluegrass or tall fescue in there, but it's the other that you want to be careful, the other weed seed, the other crop, because that other crop is going to be more or less the weeds that could come into your lawn.
And really something that is even a half to 1% can be an issue.
Right. I pulled up a little stat here that if you've got other crop of, let's say, just 0.5% of orchard grass, you could end up planting 12 to 16 orchard grass seeds per square foot. So while it may seem like, 0.5%, 0.5% doesn't seem like much, it can certainly add up very quickly. The one that sometimes we see mixed in with Kentucky bluegrass is what we call rough bluegrass, which is a very cool season loving, burns out during the heat of summer. But even a 0.5% of this, what we call rough bluegrass, you can have 25 to 35 seeds per square foot. So here again, if your expectation is this beautiful, lush lawn, you really want that other crop down to like 0.01%, almost 100%. It's hard a lot of times when they're cleaning grass seed to get everything out, but that's what we're striving for. We're striving to get the best quality possible.
Once we're satisfied with what we've picked out in terms of the grass seed, what is the next step if we're doing either a complete lawn seeding or overseeding?
Well, it's kind of just a step-by-step process. The first thing you want to do is make sure there's good soil moisture. A lot of the state of Kansas has been pretty dry lately, but for you to have good germination, good success, you need good soil moisture. So the first thing you might want to do is start watering your lawn maybe a week or so prior to the actual seeding itself. And then kind of the step-by-step process is you would probably mow the lawn a little bit shorter than you normally mow it. So if you're mowing at 3, maybe drop it down to 2, 2.5. And then what really dictates success with seeding a lawn is, like anything you plant, you need that seed to be in good contact with the soil. And you can do that by renting or hiring someone that come in and do what they call verticutting, which think about someone just slicing a whole bunch of little saw blades through the soil that cuts grooves that the seed then falls into. Or for small areas, you can get your garden rake out there and just kind of very, very vigorously work up that upper crust of the soil. Grass seed only needs to be planted maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch deep. It doesn't get planted very deep, but you need to break that crust. And then once you do that, you would spread your seed, probably hit it again with a rake or the verticutter to get that seed into the soil. And then you're off and running. And really the key to, once you get the good soil prep, the key to getting the seed up and going is keeping it evenly moist, because that's the key to germination, is even moisture, keeping that upper crust of that soil moist at all times so the grass seed can germinate and get established.
Yeah, I often hear people talking about water lightly but often.
Yeah, when you overseed the lawn, you throw all the lawn watering rules out the book. Usually when we talk about watering lawns, we talk about deep and frequent. But when it comes to seeding, it's light, frequent applications. On a warm, sunny Kansas fall day, September day, you may need to lightly water that once or twice a day. When you're going to overseed, you don't go on a 2-week vacation, because most of these seeds are going to take 7 to 14 days to germinate. And so you need to be pretty much a slave to keeping that water on. Now, if you've got a sprinkler system, you can set it and forget it. But if you're a hose dragger, then you need to make sure you're there, every day to check the moisture level. Here again, we're not talking about deep soaking, because we've already done that prior to the application. We're just talking about replacing what's lost to evaporation. The nice thing about seeding here in early September is that the soil temperatures are high. It should be cooling down a little bit, so you're going to get as rapid germination as possible to help compress maybe that watering period. Because like I said, that's probably where most people, I think when people come to seeding, they fail in maybe 3 ways. One, we've already talked about, make sure you buy quality seed. It's all the bluegrass, it's all the tall fescue, no other crop, no other types of grass. Then the next is getting that good seed soil preparation. A lot of people just think they can throw the seed out there on top of the soil, but it has to be in contact. And then the last, important step, the hurdle to success, is that watering.
And proper rate, too. We have to make sure that we're applying the right amount of seed.
Yeah, here again, if you're talking about a brand new lawn, on tall fescue, you're putting on maybe 6-8 pounds per 1,000 square feet. If you're talking bluegrass, it's 2 to 3. And then when you're overseeding, and maybe we need to define what overseeding is. Overseeding means you have a stand of grass, but it just needs to be thickened up. So you kind of guesstimate. So if you think you have 50% of the stand, you cut that new seed rate about in half. So here again, on tall fescue, from 6 to 8, you may go to 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. There is a disadvantage to really heavily seeding, and that is if you put too much seed down, it may come up, it may look great, but then those sprouts almost become in competition with each other, and it could thin out the lawn. And so the other thing with overseeding too high a rate also greatly increases your costs too. So you kind of want to stay in those ballpark numbers there to get a good even stand of grass.
If you're someone who's maybe bought a new home or someone who maybe just doesn't know a lot about lawn care or lawn turf, how do you tell what type of grass you actually have, especially if you're doing that overseeding because you want that to really blend in?
Right. That's a really good question. You could always contact Extension, and your local agent could help you potentially identify that type of grass. The best way for people to tell if it's a cool season grass, either tall fescue or bluegrass, it's one that's going to green up in March, April, and stay green probably into Thanksgiving or so. If it's a warm season grass like Bermuda or zoysia, probably doesn't green up until April, May, goes dormant with the first frost late September, October. They also tend to have runners, pretty long, 6 inches to a foot long, that move fairly rapidly. So that would be another key. But most people that have, a manicured, more, I'm going to say city lawn, probably have the tall fescue or tall fescue bluegrass mix. Honestly, Jeff, just looking at it from the lay person, sometimes it can be a little difficult because they've done such a great job on breeding tall fescue to have more of the attributes as far as look, texture of bluegrass. So sometimes it does get a little bit hard to tell the two apart.
Along those same lines, also time to start thinking about fertilizing those tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass lawns.
Correct. The one thing we didn't mention in this overseeding step is you do want to fertilize, usually with a starter fertilizer to push it. But, the goal is not to have to seed your lawn or overseed. And so September is the most important time to fertilize the cool season lawns. Here again, the tall fescue bluegrass, not the zoysia, not the Bermuda. They're shutting down for the season. But yeah, getting that application of high nitrogen fertilizer on here early September is the best way to help that lawn recover from the hot, dry summer we just had. But here again, if you're going to fertilize, you got to make sure you're watering it in. So we just don't want to put it on a really drought-stressed lawn. We want to make sure it's growing actively.
Do we need to do a soil test first or not?
Ideally, if you had a soil test, it could help tell you for sure exactly what analysis of fertilizer you need to have applied. K-State Extension does that. Usually the turnaround time's a couple weeks. When in doubt, without a soil test, I'd tell you to put on the high nitrogen, like a 30-0-0, that first number closer to 30. The next two as close to 0 as possible. And just go ahead and do that and still get your soil test, and you'll know for sure, and for future applications, whether you need phosphorus, potassium, or just the straight nitrogen fertilizer.
And will this be quick release at this point?
In September, it can be either quick release or a combination of quick, slow release. And keep in mind, on the homeowner market, only about probably a third of that fertilizer is going to be slow release. But the nice thing about slow release in September is that it kind of spoon feeds the lawn for several weeks instead of getting a big flush at once. So, yes, slow would be preferred, but, any fertilization is going to be beneficial to the lawn to help it recover from summer.
We had talked about this earlier, the fact that you might need to do some preparation. How would we determine whether or not a lawn would benefit from power raking or core aeration? And I guess, again, talking with tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. Correct.
So there's a couple of mechanical practices. So we've talked about verticutting. It's really only used if you're going to be overseeding your lawn. And a lot of people kind of throw power raking and verticutting together in this day and age of doing the same thing. So those practices are done for seeding. The other practice you mentioned is core aeration, and this is a pass that pulls plugs about the size of your finger out of the lawn every 3 inches or so. And that's really done to help break up thatch, to relieve soil compaction, get nutrients moving down in the soil. That's probably best done if you're just doing yearly maintenance. It's not the ideal practice for overseeding. It doesn't give quite a uniform stand. Or both could be done before seeding the lawn. But if your goal is seeding, verticut, power rake. If your goal is just more management, then core aerate the lawn, and that can be done September through early October. Where lawn seeding probably needs to be done September through the end of the month.
That's K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton. More information on fall lawn care is available at county and district extension offices or by visiting the online K-State Research and Extension bookstore, bookstore.ksre.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wickman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.